Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and thank you for joining us for another edition of our podcast. You can catch it every week here, either on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, our website, which is magiceverywhereinc.com, and now coming soon, our YouTube channel, our Magic Everywhere YouTube channel. We love to introduce you to children's author Jackie Hosking. Is a Nigerian-born Australian, and she moved to Australia when she was just 10 years old. She began writing for children after completing a creative writing course at her local community house in a seaside town off the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. In 2012, she was awarded a Maurice Saxby Mentorship Award as well. Her picture book, The Croc and the Platypus, was published by Walker Books Australia in 2014. She's also now has three other books published, including The Amazing Australian Road Trip, as well as Temper Tabitha, and I Really Want a Pet. In 2019, Jackie was awarded a May Gibbs Creative Time Fellowship, and she loves to write in rhyme, and when she's not writing in rhyme, she enjoys helping others with their rhyme. Jackie, welcome to Magical Books for Kids. It's wonderful to have you from halfway around the world in Australia, and thank you for getting up early to join us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Michael.
So you've published some beautiful picture books, and we just wanted to find out, of course, as a child, were there any particular books that you loved to read? Probably from the start, your first time that you started to read up until your teenage years. Were there any particular books that you loved to read?
Well, when I was very young, actually, ironically, is the name of the book that I really loved to read by A.A. Milne. So he was the author of the Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin stories. My grandfather bought me some poetry books called When We Were Very Young and Now We Are Six, and I loved having them read to me and read them later myself. I remember the Richest Scary books, the funniest storybook ever. I loved sitting and reading and watching, looking at all those illustrations, trying to find where Lowly Worm was at and all the little characters that were in that beautiful book. Then getting older, I went up to sort of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, or Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, all the Tolkien books too. I think I was reading pretty young, and so I was reading I think Tolkien was probably a little bit hard for a lot of kids maybe, but I read it pretty early. And I loved Enid Blyton too, so that was when I was much younger. I was still back in England. All the Secret Seven books, felt very loyal to the Secret Seven books. I didn't want to read the Famous Five or anything else that she'd written. Like I was just stuck with them. And the Nancy Drew mysteries I loved as well. And then getting older, I loved the time slip novels, and then I got into sort of horror. I loved John Wyndham and Stephen King and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So you were pretty much an accomplished reader at a very young age. Was it picked from the background in your family? Did your family try to convince you or inspire you to read as a young girl?
Well, they were certainly very strict on the amount of television I was allowed to watch. So that was possibly had something to do with it, and was always bought books as presents. And they, of course, are voracious readers themselves. And we still have that in common, love discussing what we've just read and movies and things. So yeah, definitely from my parents, very much great role models for reading, for sure.
Now, when you were growing up as a child, I mean, as for me, I always wanted to write. And I always had an ambition to write, even at a very young age. Was that the same for you?
I did write, but I didn't think of it as anything I would ever take any further than just something that I did. I really loved to journal, and it was never something I ever thought I could ever oh no, it was just something that I did. And it wasn't actually until my sister once said to me, because I was just kept reading all this stuff out of my journal when I saw my last child was born, and she just stopped dead in her tracks and just said, Jackie, you're a writer. And it was like, good Lord, am I? So yeah, when the community house, the local community house offered up a creative writing course, I thought, oh, I'll just give that a go then and see how that happens. So what happens there?
Now, you mentioned poetry as well, and that was one of the first things that I started with very young. It was usually from something that happened in my life that I would write poetry about. What was it? What inspired you to write poetry? Was there anything in particular in your life that happened that got you going with it, or was it just something, the desire or the love of it?
I think I write in rhyme and meter, and so that's I can't write prose poetry. I find that really tricky. Um, so I used to write in the beginning when my children were young. I used to write. It was more for the parents, so silly rhyming poetry about being a parent. And some of the first poetry I ever got published was on an English website called the Bad Mothers Club. So it was more about so the trials and tribulations of having young children running around you and trying to connect with parents struggling with the same thing. But I didn't start writing for children until I was swinging my 2-year-old through my legs and managed to put my back out and had to crawl into bed. And I was just sitting in bed for a day. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was when I wrote my first children's poem, and that was called If I Were a Giant, and that one is still going strong. That got published by the School magazine in Australia in 2005 and has since been gets published in the English reading courses in India. So it's quite gorgeous. If you YouTube If I Were a Giant, you can see all these beautiful teachers teaching the poem to their students. So that was just, coincidental. So I was stuck in bed and just wrote that, and it just, I don't know, it sort of went gangbusters from there, really.
Yeah, well, that's a little tough, right? Swinging your kids through your legs. We've all tried to do
Mm.
that, or we tried to pick them up, and we do this whole thing like
Mhm.
this, and of course, then you throw out your back and you realize that you're no longer in your 20s.
No,
Point.
that's right.
Now you said if I were a giant, what's that about? What is the actual what subject matter about?
Well, it's about a child imagining if they were a giant, would they be able to paint the sky and create what nature creates sort of naturally. I was actually walking when the idea came to me originally, I think, or at least that was what the memory I had of walking and seeing the ocean from the top of a hill. And yeah, the first line, it's usually that's how a poem starts. And I just thought, if I were a giant, I wonder if I could stand on my tiptoes and paint the sky. So it just goes on through the child imagining, how this giant would do it using, tree branches as paint brushes and using, the yellow corn to paint the beaches and just, different, sort of goes through the day as well. The child ends up at night and then, ponders, I could be a giant on the books on my shelf, but I know when I wake, nature's painted herself.
So really, your this particular incident of you hurting your back actually inspired you to start writing for children in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So have you ever thanked? I guess it was your daughter that you threw your
No,
leg. Oh, your
it was
son.
my son. Yeah, my
Okay.
son. He's 21 next birthday. So
Oh, okay, we're
that's
not
how
going to
long
do
ago
that. We're
that
not going to do
was.
that, right? We're not going to throw
Now
him
he
through your
could
legs.
swing me now, probably.
That's
Yeah,
gonna-
swing me about.
Right, right. So you ever tell him that you were my inspiration for writing "If I Were a Giant"?
Yes,
Oh, he must be.
yes,
Yeah, he
definitely.
must
And
be
he is a
thrilled.
giant too.
Is he? Yes.
He's
Okay.
6'3" now. Yeah,
6'3". Oh my goodness, he is a giant. Okay.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So the book, the Croc and the Platypus, was published by Walker Books Australia in 2014. What was the idea behind this particular book? How long did it take you to write it? How did you find your artist, or did the publishing company do that for you?
Yeah, Walker was always someone that I admired. And a friend of mine had a picture book published with them, which was a rewrite of I Know an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. So she wrote a book called I Know an Old Sailor Who Swallowed a Krill. So I saw that they were partial to rewriting stories that obviously were out of copyright. And my grandmother always used to do the read me The Owl and the Pussycat, recite that Edward Lear poem to me, The Owl and the Pussycat. So I basically started out with this story as a writing exercise to see whether I could copy completely the poem, or the rhyme and the meter exactly. So there's 3 verses, and there's obviously a special way that the thing's written. And I wanted to make an Aussie version, so it's with Australian animals. So the croc and the platypus obviously are Australian animals. And yeah, so basically it was just a writing exercise to see if I could get it exactly the same, like pretty much syllable for syllable. And I did that, and I sent it to Walker, and they did really love it, and they held on to it because publishers, it's a waiting game, held on to it and held on to it. And then in the meantime, I got a Morris Saxby mentorship where I worked further on the story with my mentors, and we improved it. And yeah, once it was polished right up, Walker took it on. So it was really wonderful.
So this was a 2-tier process. You first wrote a version, you gave it to Walker, and then you did the mentorship, and that helped you push the book further along as far as you felt, content wise, and the way it came across. So
Yeah.
how long was that particular process from start to finish for you for this particular book?
It was years, actually.
It was. Okay.
Yes, the contract was signed in 2012. I'd probably written it 2 years before that. And then it was out in 2014. So it was a good 5-year process for that one to come through. The books since have been a bit quicker, but yeah, that one definitely took a while. That was and I didn't choose the publisher. The illustrator, the publisher chose Marjorie, and I just love the illustrations. Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, you mentioned the process and everything, and when I saw the platypus, I always think of the Disney animation series. It's Phineas and Ferb, and they have this Perry the platypus.
Oh yeah.
He believes he's a detective and everything like that. And it's a very wonderful.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that took 16 years for the creators to find an animation company or network that was willing to publish it. So when I hear the stories about how long it takes for people, I understand the process. It can be a really long haul and everything. And a lot of people just see the finished product and they think, oh, okay, I'll write a children's book or this or that. It takes a great deal of time, editing, and as you know, the process can take quite a bit. Now you have other books too. The Amazing Australia Adventure Road Trip. Is that the book that was out recently, or is this one that's coming out?
Yep, that one came out in January this year, and it's doing really well. Ironically, COVID seems to have helped it along because nobody can go anywhere. And so we can vicariously travel around Australia through this book. And it was just a coincidence. That book too has been in the pipeline for sort of 3 years.
Oh, so it wasn't done for the pandemic. Okay.
No, it wasn't. That wasn't an impetus at all, but just happened to come out at a time where we're all stuck at home.
So that particular book, from what I understand, is the people that I speak to in children's publishing, they said their books flew off the shelves because parents were home with their children. And of course, they had a lot of time on their hands. So children's books did very well during the pandemic. And I can see why this particular book would do well, because it sounds like it's also not only a fun and entertaining book, but it's educational.
Yeah, it's got both arms to it. So the story is written in rhyming verse. Obviously, that's all I can do, it seems.
Right.
So that's, there's a narrative story about a family traveling around Australia trying to find the perfect picnic spot for their auntie who's turning 60. And she's a little bit fussy. And so they sort of accidentally do a road trip because she keeps finding fault with where they're at. And then on each double page spread, there is facts about the area, what's going on there, and lots of the educational information So he travels around, all of the states and territories of Australia, and visits lots of places and lots of exciting animals and things that are there. And yeah, it's Walker actually do a couple of those sorts of books where they have a story and then a factual side of it as well. But this one's a little bit more. The story's a little bit sort of more. Entertaining, no, that's probably not the word, I don't know, it's
Well,
longer, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There's nothing wrong with entertaining because that's what children love to be. And if you can teach them some facts about the country and traveling and everything like that, I think it goes hand in
Hmm.
hand. It's a wonderful experience. Now, is there a particular couple of pages that you enjoy and you'd like to share with the audience so they have a little taste of if they are to buy this particular book? Um,
Yeah,
so that way they would have a good understanding of how it goes, the rhyming, of course. I love rhyme. I always loved rhyme, which is
yeah,
why I probably loved, writing poetry as a kid. As I got older,
yeah,
I started writing about people rejecting me, just girls rejecting me, and I used to write
yeah,
the romantic poetry of rejection,
yeah.
you know.
I started off writing very angsty sort of poetry as well.
Exactly, right,
um
right.
yeah. I'll read a couple of pages where they're down in Sydney, so that's
Okay.
obviously the capital of New South Wales. So they start in Melbourne and they go around Australia clockwise, so they're
Oh,
starting to
great.
come
Okay, that
back
sounds good.
around the coast. All right. So then onwards we travel through towns big and small, down south further still to the big city sprawl. Hugely impressed, our auntie says grouse as we stop at the Sydney Opera House. And she can't wait to climb the Harbour Bridge, which according to her is ridgy didge, but afraid of heights with a fear she'll fall, that climbs not as grouse as she thought at all. So, of course, she's nervous on the Skyway too. But wow, the Blue Mountains, what an awesome view. Surrounded by glass, the cage floats aloft. But Auntie's not happy. She wants to get off.
Of course she does. She's a little crank, right? And you're trying to make sure that she has a good time because sometimes you just can't please everybody, can you?
No, no, she's
No.
tricky to please.
Now you also have Temper Tabitha as well, and I really want a pet. So Temper Tabitha, very very cute cover and everything, about a girl who's having I guess a temper tantrum. Is that what the story is about?
Yes, she's a feisty little girl who likes to get her way, and one day goes shopping with her mother and fancies everything that she sees, this and that, and everything. Um, doesn't use her manners, of course, just demands what we've all seen kids in the supermarket behaving that way,
Oh yeah.
and
Yep.
comes across a sparkly hat that she fancies, but just as the mother's about to grab the hat for her, her grandfather's there with his grandson, and he wants the hat too.
Oh boy.
So then there's a tug of war happens,
Oh yeah.
and the parents are all gathering around choosing which side should win and which should lose, not behaving as parents should either, so everybody's succumbs to bad behavior in the end. Yeah, so there's a bit of a
So are they
kerfuffle
all
in the
doing the
shop.
tug of war? Are the parents
They're all
doing?
yes, they all join in, and of course the hat then probably shouldn't give the whole thing away, but
No, no, no. I
yeah,
can
in the end
imagine. I can
she
imagine what's going to
learns.
happen.
She, yeah, she does learn
Now
a
that's
lesson.
an illustration I'd love to see where the parents and the kids are all pulling on the hat and
Mhm,
everything like that.
mhm.
And okay, so Temper Tabitha. Now is that book out? And
Yeah, that one's out. That came out last year. That's with Larrikin House, so that's a different publisher. The Croc and the Platypus and The Amazing Australian Road Trip are both with Walker.
okay,
And yeah, Larrikin House have done Tabitha, and I believe that's been sold into America. There's a publisher, I can't remember the name, but that will be available in America too soon.
okay, and these particular books you can find them also on America Amazon, right? I know you can find
I
them on
believe
your sites.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll give you have we'll give you a website out too, and after this is all over. You also have I really want a pet. Now, is this in getting ready to be printed, or is this already out too?
This is out next month, so it's ready to go. That's with
Great.
Scholastic.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's another a really fun one, again written in rhyme and meter, and illustrations are brilliant. I love Shane McGowan's illustrations, as I did, the other two books as well. The other three books, just the illustrations for me are everything. Just a picture book, obviously, without any pictures is not a book at all.
No,
Once
no,
you
no. Yeah.
No, once you give over to the publisher, it really does become a collaboration. It's, it becomes our book. It's definitely not just my book. Love how the illustrations interpret my story, what they add to it, how, just really brilliant. That's such a fun, and it's the same with poetry. When you get poetry, published in magazines and you see the illustrations, it's magical, absolutely magical.
Yeah, there's so many talented. The one thing I've learned about being on Facebook, and I've seen these children's author and illustrator groups, and there's so many talented people out there that are just want to get a chance to show their work and everything. And so this is one of the benefits I get, is I get to interview well-known authors and authors not so well-known, authors just starting out, or authors just wanting to show their material for the first time. So I really want a pet. Who doesn't want a pet? All I remember is our little guy, little brother. He was named after the dog in the Disney movie Mulan. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, he spent a wonderful 11 and a half years with us, gave us so much love. And when you lose a pet, it's like losing a family member. And it was the first time I ever had a pet. So why don't you tell us about the work behind I Really Want a Pet, how long it took, and what was the thought process? Was it about a pet that you had, or
No, it's a really funny story, actually. I was in Canberra at the time doing the May Gibbs Creative Time Fellowship. So I was up there for a month, and I was on Facebook. So love Facebook.
Yeah.
And there was something was put up there about advice given to parents by children. So it was like a list of, I can't remember now, maybe 25 bits of advice that children have given parents. And one of them was, do not allow your parent to brush your hair if they're in a bad mood. So that was one of them. So that was funny. And there was a whole lot like this. And the other one was, if you want a dog, ask for a horse. So I decided that I would take that one step further. And the first line in the book is, can I have a dinosaur? I really want a pet. I'd love a cuddly dinosaur. I haven't had one yet. Can I have a dinosaur? They're on the internet. And then mum comes in saying, no, you can't have a dinosaur. And she's coming up with all the reasons why pets are a big responsibility. And, so she keeps coming through with, no, you can't. So the child just works her way down the line, smaller and smaller animals. And all the time there's this little kitten that's poking around everywhere, because really all she wants is the little kitten. So it's like a clever way of getting the pet she really wants. She starts off, with something completely ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. So that was purely taken off that advice from a child.
So that's sort of like breaking down your parents in that way. You ask for the biggest thing, and then you work your way down to the smallest.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the one thing that you want, they're already worn down, and they're just going to say, yes, yes, you can have it. So such a clever idea. Boy, children are so clever, aren't they?
They are clever. That's right. Yeah.
And there's no filters on the children at all.
No.
So where would people find your books? Obviously, you're in Australia. So you mentioned that I Really Want a Pet, or Temper Tantrum, or Temper Tabitha will be available in America, right? Somewhere on Amazon. Is that the idea behind this?
Yeah, look, honestly,
well, we'll check it out, and we'll post it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, with the American side of things. Yeah, but definitely Booktopia in Australia. So I guess you just Google and see where it pops up.
Right, exactly. Right. That's what we're doing. That's the one thing I can do, actually. I'm a professional Googler. I can Google everything else that comes up new. There's like all this different technology, like Clubhouse, this, that, blah, blah, blah. It just like I can't keep
No,
up. I can't keep up with it.
no,
So,
yeah,
so
no,
is there a
same.
is there a book you have in a pipeline that may come out in the next year or two that you're working on right now?
Yes, I have another book with Walker coming out in October. And I've just had news that I'm getting another contract with Walker, but that's all hush hush just now, but I can
Right.
just give you that. So
Right.
so we've got 2 picture books coming out, in the future.
Wow. So
And
you're gonna be busy. You're gonna be busy. Right. Right.
yeah, it all
Um,
came in a rush. I sort of went from, the Croc and the Platypus in 2014, and then massive 6-year gap. But I'm obviously all the time I must have been writing, in that time. But then all of a sudden, all these books all tumbled out. But I think that can happen. That's not the first person that's happened to. So yeah, it's sort of the way it goes. A bit of a tumble afterwards, a bit like giving birth. The head's the hardest, and then the rest falls out.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know that, but I'm gonna take your word for it.
Yes, all the girls will know what I'm talking
Right,
about.
exactly. That's a situation that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to experience in my life. So, so this is so have you during the pandemic, have you been Zooming with children or classes, or have you done any of that?
I've
How's it
not.
been there where you are in Australia? Because here in Florida, we've been open since last June. So,
Yeah, we've just slowly started coming back into the world. I did a face-to-face with the kids at my local bookshop last week, which was fantastic.
oh, it's wonderful.
I've done Zoom meetings with my publishers and things, but I haven't done a lot of in classroom stuff. I'm a bit shy, to be honest, so I don't hunt those sort of jobs down. But obviously, if I was asked to do them, then I'm happy to do them. But yeah, I'd much rather do face to face.
So yeah, so if the audience wants to Google you, they can find you because I know you do a blog and you have a website. I'll spell your name so that way people understand where they can find you. But if you Google Jackie, Jackie, Hosking, Hosking, you can find her work on the internet. She's on Twitter, Instagram. I just followed her, so please follow her as well. And that you can certainly catch up on her books. Just Google her name and find the books. I guess that's the easiest thing to do today. So
Yeah.
so thank you so much for joining us. And you can hear Jackie and every other author on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Magic Everywhere Inc.com, as well as YouTube, the Magic Everywhere channel. So it's all there. You can find her interview there, as well as all the other authors on Magical Books for Kids. So Jackie, thanks so much for joining us for another edition of Magical Books for Kids, sponsored by Magic Everywhere Incorporated in Kissimmee, Florida. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael, for having me, and thank you for supporting all of us creatives out here. It's really important to get your name and your books out there. So it's really wonderful that you take the time to do that.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time early in the morning there in Australia to join me in the evening here in Florida. So it was a lot of joy. It was great to hear you also read parts of your book. And so I'm looking forward to reading more of your material and everything. And congratulations. You're very prolific and you got more books coming out. So a lot more wonderful books to read from you. So thank you so much again for joining us at Magical Books for Kids.
Thank you. You're
All right.
welcome.
And please join us next week for another edition of Magical Books for Kids, sponsored by Magic Everywhere Incorporated here in Kissimmee, Florida. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere Inc., a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.